Many people over 40 think it's too late to start a business, or that starting one requires a lot of money. But what if the only thing you need is something you already make at home? Whether you're 40, 50, or even 65, if you know how to bake one good cake, you might already have a business sitting right in your kitchen. In this video, I'll show you how one homemade cake recipe can turn into a small home business, even if you've never run a business before. So why does something as simple as a homemade cake actually work as a business? Let's think about it for a second. People are always looking for cakes. Holidays, small family celebrations, office parties, school events. There's always a reason for someone to bring a cake to the table. And here's the interesting part. Many people today actually prefer homemade cakes over big bakery chains. A homemade cake feels more personal. It feels like it was made with care, not just mass-produced in a factory. Now let's talk about the biggest reason this works so well. The startup cost is incredibly low. In many cases, you already have almost everything you need sitting right in your kitchen. An oven, a few basic baking tools, and most importantly, a cake recipe you already know how to make. You're not renting a shop. You're not buying expensive machines. You're simply using a skill you already have. And if you're over 40, you actually have a few advantages that younger beginners often don't. You have patience. You have experience in the kitchen. And you know how to stick with a recipe until it's just right. That consistency matters when people start ordering from you. And here's something many beginners don't realize. You don't need 10 different cake recipes to get started. In fact, many successful home bakers begin with just one cake they make really well. One cake that friends and family already love. Because sometimes, one really good cake is all it takes to start something bigger. Alright, so how do you actually turn one homemade cake into a small home business? Let's break it down into 5 simple steps. Nothing complicated, just practical things you can start doing right away. Step 1. Choose one cake you bake well. First things first, choose one cake recipe you already make really well. Not 5 recipes, not 10, just one good cake. Think about it for a moment. Do you already have a cake that friends or family always ask for? Maybe it's your chocolate cake, your carrot cake, a classic vanilla sponge, or even a simple tea cake you bring out when guests visit. That's the one you start with. The goal here is not variety. The goal is consistency. When someone orders from you, they want to know that the cake will taste just as good every single time. So start with one recipe and focus on perfecting it. Step 2. Test it with friends and family. Before you start selling, do a small test. Bake your cake and share it with 5 to 10 people you trust. Friends, family members, neighbors, people who will give you honest feedback. Ask them a couple of simple questions. How does it taste? Is the sweetness just right? Would you actually buy this cake for a small celebration? This step is important because it helps you see your cake from a customer's point of view, not just as the person baking it. Step 3. Calculate a simple cost. Next comes a little bit of simple math. Nothing complicated. Let's take a basic homemade chocolate cake as an example. Here's what the ingredients like flour, sugar, eggs, butter or oil, cocoa powder, milk and small ingredients like baking powder or vanilla might roughly cost $6 to $7. Now add simple packaging, a cake box or container, which might cost around $1.50 to $2. That means your total cost per cake is around $8 to $9. Now let's look at the selling price. A homemade cake like this in many local areas can easily sell for $18 to $25, depending on size and decoration. So even at a modest price of $20 per cake, Your profit could be around $10 to $12 per cake. And remember, this is just for a simple homemade cake. Step 4. Start with your local network. Now here's where most people find their very first customers. Not from advertising, not from a website, but from people they already know. Start small and tell your neighbors. Mention it to friends. Let colleagues at work know you're baking homemade cakes on weekends. You can also share it in local community groups or neighborhood groups online. Step 5. Use simple promotion. Promotion doesn't have to be complicated either. A simple message in your local group can work surprisingly well. You can type, "Homemade chocolate cake available this weekend. Freshly baked. Limited orders." That's it. Short and simple. You can share it in local WhatsApp groups, Facebook community groups, neighborhood forums. And don't underestimate word of mouth. When someone enjoys your cake, they naturally tell their friends. That's how many small home baking businesses slowly grow. Now let's talk about something everyone is probably wondering. How much money could this realistically make? And I want to keep this very honest and practical. This isn't about getting rich overnight. It's about building a small, steady side income from your kitchen. Let's go back to our simple homemade chocolate cake example. Earlier we estimated that the total cost of making one cake, including ingredients like flour, sugar, eggs, butter, cocoa powder, and basic packaging, comes to roughly $8 to $9 per cake. Now let's say you sell that cake for around $20. That's a pretty reasonable price for a homemade cake in many neighborhoods. That leaves you with about $11 to $12 profit per cake. Now imagine you sell just 5 cakes a week. Maybe 2 to your neighbor, 1 for a small office event, and another 2 for family celebrations. 5 cakes multiplied by about $10 profit each gives you roughly $50 per week. Over a month, that comes to about $200. Now that might not sound huge, but remember, you're baking from home, using a skill you already have. And here's where it gets interesting. As more people taste your cake and word starts spreading, you might begin getting 10, 15, or even 20 orders a week. And if your orders start growing like that, it's a good time to quickly check your local rules for home baking businesses. Many places allow small home food businesses with a simple permit or food safety registration, so it's always worth making sure you're operating the right way. Now let's continue with the example. At 20 cakes per week, with roughly $10 profit per cake, that's about $200 a week, which works out to roughly $800 a month from a small home baking business. Again, this may not turn you into a millionaire overnight, but it can absolutely become a nice, steady stream of extra income coming straight from your kitchen. And for many people, that's exactly how small businesses begin, one order at a time. Now I want to take a moment to say something important, especially if you're watching this and thinking, maybe I'm a little too old to start something like this. A lot of people over 40 believe that starting a business is something only young people do. But the truth is, many successful small businesses are started by people who are in their 40s, 50s, or even 60 and beyond. That is because experience matters. When you've spent years cooking, baking, managing a home, or working in different jobs, you've already built skills that younger beginners are still trying to learn. Things like patience, consistency, and discipline. And those qualities are incredibly valuable when starting something small. You don't need to do everything at once. Start small and move forward one step at a time. So if you're over 40 and wondering whether it's too late to try something new, remember this: it's not too late. Sometimes all it takes is a little courage to take that first step and show the world what you're capable of. Because no matter your age, you still have the power to rise, conquer, and rule. And your journey might start with something as simple as one good cake from your kitchen. Now before you jump in and start baking cakes for customers, let's quickly talk about 5 common mistakes beginners make, and more importantly, how you can avoid them. The first mistake is trying to sell too many types of cakes right away. When people get excited about starting a small baking business, they often think they need a big menu: chocolate cake, carrot cake, red velvet, cheesecakes, cupcakes. The list keeps growing. But in reality, that can make things harder. A smarter approach is to start with just 1 or 2 cakes you make really well. Focus on quality and consistency first. Once people start ordering regularly, you can always add more options later. The second mistake is pricing your cakes too low. A lot of beginners feel uncomfortable charging money for something they bake at home. So they end up selling their cakes for barely more than the cost of ingredients. But remember, your price should include everything: the ingredients, the packaging, and the time you spent baking and preparing the cake. Your work has value, and it's perfectly reasonable to charge a fair price for it. At this point, some of you might be thinking, "This sounds nice, but can this really work for me?" That's a very normal question, especially if you're over 40 and trying something new. And the truth is, many small businesses start exactly like this, with one simple product made well and shared with people nearby. The third mistake is waiting too long to start. A lot of people spend months trying to make everything perfect: the recipe, the packaging, the pricing, the promotion. But perfection can easily turn into procrastination. So take a few simple orders and learn as you go, because progress usually begins with action, not perfection. The fourth mistake is ignoring presentation and packaging. People often say, "Don't judge a book by its cover." But in the world of food, the truth is, people do buy with their eyes first. Even if your cake tastes amazing, poor presentation can quietly hurt your sales. For example, no proper cake box or wrapping the cake in simple plastic can make it look less appealing. Instead, keep things clean and neat. Use a simple cake box. Add a small label or sticker with your name. Make sure the cake looks tidy and attractive. You don't need fancy or expensive packaging, just something that looks clean, thoughtful, and professional. That small detail can make a big difference in how customers perceive your cake. The fifth mistake is taking too many orders too soon. When the first few customers start ordering, it's exciting. And that excitement can sometimes lead beginners to say yes to every order that comes in. Suddenly, you might find yourself baking 6 or 8 cakes for one weekend, staying up late at night trying to finish everything. But there's something many people don't think about at first: the cleanup. The more cakes you bake, the more mixing bowls, baking trays, spatulas, and counters you use. And after all the baking is done, the kitchen still needs to be cleaned and organized again. If you bake 5 cakes, that's 5 rounds of mixing, baking, decorating, and cleaning. And when the kitchen starts looking like a disaster zone, the stress quickly takes the fun out of baking. A much better approach is to start small. Maybe take 2 or 3 orders per week in the beginning. This gives you enough time to bake properly, keep your kitchen clean, and stay relaxed while you learn the process. As you become more comfortable and efficient, you can slowly increase the number of orders. Remember, a good home business grows best when it grows steady and manageable, not rushed. So if you're over 40 and wondering whether you can start something small from home, remember this: a business doesn't always begin with a big investment, a fancy office, or some groundbreaking idea. Sometimes it starts with something much simpler: one good cake that people genuinely love. The skills you've built over the years, the patience you've developed, and the experience you carry with you are all powerful advantages. And when you combine those with the courage to take that first small step, amazing things can happen. Because no matter your age, you still have the ability to rise, conquer, and rule. And who knows, Your journey might begin with something as simple as a cake baking in your own kitchen. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, and subscribe to the channel for more practical ideas on starting small businesses and building income, step by step. And before you go, I'm curious, what cake do you bake best? Let me know in the comments below.